Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. All right, so we're calling the meeting to order at 8:35, and the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Perfect. Is there a second? We're looking for a second to approve the agenda this morning.
We still can't hear you, Greg, for some reason. It looks like you're unmuted, but we weren't able to hear you.
But officially, that thumb up works too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second.
Perfect.
There he is. Yeah.
Thank you. We can hear you now. All right, great. Thank you so much. So the next item is to approve the minutes from our last meeting in January. Hopefully everyone had a chance to check those out. So do we have a motion for the minutes?
So moved.
Perfect.
Second.
All right, motion and a second, and all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Great, thank you so much. We have an agenda and minutes. So then the next item is unfinished business, and we're going to be talking about the asbestos and demolition fees. So for this one, I think I'll be turning it over to Jeff.
Sure, I can kick it off. Yeah, this is a continuing discussion about the conversation we had back in at the January meeting, where we had presented a staff proposal around adjustments around increasing our asbestos and demolition fees. We had some good discussion in January, and there were a few questions that the committee asked, and so we added an addendum to the original memo. So I don't know, so hopefully you scrolled through the first couple pages of the memo, and it's on the third, I think the third page. Answers some of the questions. Specifically, there were some questions about, because it was the fee for the single family residence that was the largest increase. So there were some questions about about the work that ORCAA does on that. So with that, I think I'll just hand it over to Mike, since again, Mike was not at the January meeting, but he can speak, maybe kind of quickly walk us through the answers to the questions on the sheet. Unless, or if the committee just wants to, specific, or if there's any questions that you want to ask us, or would it be helpful for Mike to go through the sheet? How would you like to proceed?
I think it'd be helpful to have Mike go through the sheet. It's just it's just 4 questions. And these came up last time, so I think we would likely have the same questions this time. So if you want to just take us through that last page, that'd be perfect.
Okay, sure. One of the big questions was, what do you get for the single family residence? The proposal to go to $100. There's a lot in that original 47 and a lot in the 100. Basically, you're gonna the jump is partly because in the past it was kept artificially low, so that the people would not be pushed away or scared away, but it wasn't covering the cost, because if you think about $47, we have the administrative costs that I mentioned in there. We're bringing in the notification, we're checking it for money. Did you have the right amount of money? Does it match up with the asbestos amount? Then the administrative people have to then, reconcile that with their budget and the monies, and then the deposition of the money. But in between that process, there's a whole lot of hand holding, because the single family residence people get confused by the fees sometimes, and we're trying to make that easier. So just right there, you've got a lot of time just in handling, as you guys would know with your counter staff when they come in and get a permit. There's a lot of hand holding, there's a lot of questions back and forth. And then so, the 100 gets closer to that. And then once it gets through the front desk, think of it again as your building department gets a building permit, or your planning department. The people behind the desk technically have to then do the inspection of the property. You got to do the additional review, especially for this asbestos surveys accompanied with all the demolitions. Got to check the survey, which is anywhere from 30 pages to could be 20 if it's a big one. And you gotta look at all the samples, you gotta look at, where did they take them? So there's a whole lot of review times, what, did it go to the right lab? It's amazing what people try to, what happens, whether they try to do it on purpose or they're just uninformed. So we're doing all that review work inside. We're also looking at potential receptors. Is it asbestos work done next to a daycare center or next to an elderly center? We're looking at those because some of those are gonna highlight as, oh, this is a little more heightened awareness, and we're gonna probably inspect those. So there's a lot of that. And then you also have to count the public education and the outreach we do. We do, when we see a single family residence done by a homeowner, we try to make sure they understand what they're getting into. It could be a lot of work, especially popcorn ceiling. It could be, how they want to know how they wrap the material, how do they keep it wet. And we've got some how-tos on our website trying to educate them that way. But a lot of times they want to know, and we want them to know, we don't want them to do it the wrong way and expose themselves and or others. So there's a lot of hand holding there. And then finally, there is the site inspections on some of those, because again, if they're going to be near a potential little area that might be a little more heightened of awareness, we want to be out there, make sure they do it right. And then of course, the sad part is then if we have to enforce, that enforcement gets thrown into that, time is put into that too. So you put all that in there, you're probably talking, we easily use the $100 or more again. And I work for the counties doing in their development departments, and it's very similar to people, whether they're on-site sewage or solid waste or water. There's a lot of administrative, and then there's the work that when it gets to the people who will approve or review that notification, and then you also go out in the field to do some of that. So the $100 covers all of that, and in essence, it covers all that. But if we have any extended time on anything, the $100 doesn't cover it. We're still in the hole on that. I want to make that clear. So that's what you're getting with the 47 that used to be. Same thing. That was probably shot just with the administrative work too. So again, that's what you're going to get for the $100. The people do get a lot of interaction with us for that $100. And I think it's worthy of it. It's a lot of public education. It's a lot of handholding.
Mike, if I could just add that I know that you and the team have looked a lot at how to streamline our internal processes. So removing some of the admin time so that it goes straight to the inspectors. So that's something that we're also doing, is looking at how we can be more efficient in our own processing of these as well.
Yeah, definitely. We put together, I think it was mentioned last time, a how-to video on how to fill these out, so that we can refer them to that. And then if they still have questions, come back. And it's fairly new, so we don't know how much that has cut the cost, but people are going to it, so that's a good thing. Will the notification cause people not to apply? Basically, it's too expensive, I'm gonna not apply. That's always gonna be a concern. I feel the $100 won't, because most of the people who are doing asbestos work on their own or through contractors, there's a lot of extra money that they're saving if they're doing it by themselves. If they were to, and a lot of these people, we encourage them to call contractors and see what it costs, because they would know, contractor would know what to do. So if a single family residence individual calls the contractor, he says, oh, it cost me $1,500 to do that job, let's say, for example. Well, if they do it themselves, they gotta pay $100 notification fee and probably a couple $100 disposal costs. So that $100 that they pay to us still is gonna be way cheaper in the project cost than to hire a contractor. And it is generally something that when people are ripping stuff out, they are remodeling, putting more stuff back, and it's a cost that I think, although $100 is a lot to everybody, it's one that probably gets budgeted into most of the remodeling jobs, and we try to get the outreach to them. So again, there's a couple factors there. If they're doing it themselves, the $100 to us as part of the job is going to not compare anywhere close to if they hired a contractor and paid that fee. So and we try to explain that to them so they know yeah, although it's 100, it won't be, it'll save them a lot of money. And again, we will walk them through how to do it, and we will give them the help that they need to do it right, so that, we don't have, hopefully, any exposure. Here. Will any contractor pushback? I can tell you that, when we did this, as it says in the middle, over 10 years ago, there was another increase that was beyond the CPI. And we sent a notice out to all of our contractors, asbestos contractors. And we have, I'm gonna guess 20 or 30 on our list that we deal with routinely. And out of them, only one of them had a comment that came back and commented. And they weren't happy, but they eventually understood why, and they did it. So in the past, we did what we're doing right, trying to do here, and we had one out of probably 30. So that's, we talked to them, Robert talked to them quite a bit and explained that. And again, in that case, we kind of increased it. In some cases, we were charging more than the other agencies. In this case, we're not, for the most part. We are in line with the other agencies. So some of these people will work in Southwest Clean Air area, and they'll work in Puget Sound. And they'll know that we're in the ballpark. So that, also, I think, will help reduce any pushback. So I don't think we'll get a lot of pushback. I mean, we're definitely planning on sending out, notices to the contractors and letting them know here's, increases, and also at the home fairs and stuff that Dan goes to, we'll be doing what we can to educate the contractors and the single family residences of this change in fees, so we can do that. But that's what I'd say about the pushback, is last time we only got one out of however many we sent out, and I wouldn't expect much difference this time. Who pays the fees for the contractor jobs? While the contractor pays the fees if they're gonna do a contractor job, we require the contractor to fill out the form, because there are certain requirements through L&I and through ORCAA that they need to follow. Timing and everything, so we want them to fill it out. But I'm not foolish enough to think that they don't pass that fee on to the homeowner or the building owner. But that fee they pass on to it, because there is competition amongst all these contractors, and sometimes it's pretty fierce when we hear the differences. They may eat part of it and to win a bid. They're in the business to make money, of course, and they'll do that. But that's kind of an independent thing based on the contractors, and they're all making bids, they're competing, and that fee, in a perfect world, on their inside will be paid by the homeowner, but the contractor pays it to us. But, they got room to negotiate. They're making money and they're bidding other contractors, and we have not seen or heard a lot of complaints from the contractors or the single family residences about how much they have to pay for that type of notification. So that's I think a quick explanation of those questions that we had. To say that we do an awful lot of work in asbestos. We had one hotel the other day that 3 hours just dealing with the survey, trying to get it right. And because it was a hotel, a bigger project. And so we got to take the average of this. You can get a single family residence that's easy. You can maybe zip through it, but then you're going to get a hotel that has several rooms and it costs you more. So we're trying to find an average that works.
Thanks, Mike.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. Thanks for walking us through all those questions. That helps me kind of understand some of the questions that came up last month. How do other board members feel? Are there more questions, or does that satisfy kind of what concerns and thoughts we had last month? Go ahead, Mike. And I see Mike joined us. Hey, welcome.
Sorry
We
for
were
being
just-
late. Yeah,
No, that's
had a
okay.
different Zoom meeting that I was in. So, I guess what I would say is, so I don't really have much heartburn about the asbestos fee, other than it's always going to be a challenge to communicate this to the individuals that are doing it, because what are they getting for it? It's just a notification. And so I don't know how to solve that problem. That's something that I heard from a resident in Clallam County within the last month or so. It's just hard to explain that we need a notification program and we need to have it funded, but an individual person doesn't feel like they're getting much for that. They're just paying this fee so that someone can know that maybe there's this, but then there's no asbestos. And so I don't think we can solve that, I will just say, but I don't really have heartburn over the asbestos fees. What I really wanted to dig into is, what are the demolition fees doing? What is the point of the demolition fee? And from my perspective, I'll just say my county, we have a lot of aging buildings and a large need of redevelopment. Like I said, I think in last month's meeting, when I was on a city council, I suggested, should we be subsidizing demolition just because we have so many underutilized lots that have buildings on them that have no value and just drag down the development value of these places in our most urban city where we need economic development and housing development. So I don't want to make it harder to demolish or more expensive to demolish. I want to make it cheaper. So I'll just put that out and see if staff have any comments.
Go ahead, Dan, I see your hand.
Yeah, so sorry to jump in, but a couple things that following up on Mike's comments, I think the communication is key on notification versus permit. So really what the notification is saying, we're trusting you to have looked at the rules and followed them. You're going to do demolition. That's part of it. Part of the demolition is getting a survey. And so if the survey comes back negative, that's where you're done. If you have a positive asbestos finding, then you go into the asbestos notification. So, and just anecdotally, looking at myself, my wife and I are looking at remodeling our kitchen. And we've got some bids ranging, as Mike said, they're very competitive, ranging from 50,000 to 78,000. But if we do our own demolition, we can save $3,000 to $8,000. And so $100 for me to do a demolition notification, and I'm virtually certain there's no asbestos, and what I'm demolishing is basically a drywall ceiling and a little area of tile on the wall. We're not doing flooring. We don't have popcorn ceilings, but again, by making sure I follow the rules, do a notification through demolition, do my asbestos survey, I'm going to spend $100 and save potentially 5,000 or 6,000 in demolition if I do the work myself. So it's really about the notification is saying you're telling us you did the right thing.
I really liked your example. And it actually triggered in my mind that I did a similar thing where we did our own demolition when we did a kitchen remodel and saved a couple $1,000. So that helps. Thank you.
And if I do find asbestos, then I decide whether I want to take the risk of doing it myself or hiring an abatement company.
Thank you. I have a hand in the room. I have Mike, and then I have Greg online.
I was just gonna, go a little further than what Dan said, and specifically the demolition question. When does it get, if you got a, building that you don't think, like Mike was saying, some old building, maybe you don't think it has asbestos. You basically get our review of you're notifying us, and what the public doesn't see is if the survey says no asbestos, we're still reviewing that survey to make sure it's been done by a proper asbestos person. You can buy asbestos tests from the Home Depot. You take your own sample and send away. Those don't count. They're not regulated, and you don't know how well and if they're pulling the right spot. So you're getting us to review the survey to make sure there is no asbestos there, make sure they were done properly, make sure it was sent to the proper lab that is accredited. There are some people who will do asbestos readings in their basement, basically. There was a couple before we required certification because they have the skills, but they don't get accredited, which basically tests to make sure they know what they're doing. So we're gonna look at that. And then if you get asbestos, then you also get our, education that's gonna go further than, hey, just knock it down carefully. Occasionally on commercial buildings, Mike, we get dust complaints from them not controlling the dust when they knock it down, and then that is something that we do deal with. We don't get that from a residential one. And again, commercial ones are generally held to a different standard, not all, but most of them go through a federal NESHAP standard. So they're gonna get basically, what we're doing with those is making sure that the owner of the building and the contractor who's knocking it down is not gonna get exposed for asbestos because someone sampled wrong, or they're doing a project that isn't accounting for the asbestos. So really, it's as much a public service to the neighboring area of a demolition as it is to the people doing it, because if you knocked it down with asbestos, not only is the site gonna be contaminated, you're gonna have that asbestos contaminate the contractor, the neighbors, all the way to the transfer station and the workers there. So it's kind of the assurance that, you know, that hopefully that, the exposure risk is a lot lower because we're looking at stuff and we have employees who are trained to look for that.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I guess I just had to respond to Dan's example as well, saying if I was in the same boat and was pretty sure there wasn't asbestos and was trying to save money, I probably wouldn't do that. I'd be value engineering right and left and would not do that $100 asbestos reporting, and would just be sure would change my mind if I saw something that rang of asbestos. But I don't know. Not really contributing to the conversation. I just, as homeowners go through this constant, and we battle with this too. Are you adding value with the regulatory process? And I think this does add value. I don't have a problem with it as listed. So I guess I'm just being difficult. Sorry, I didn't have a lot to add.
So what I'm hearing, Greg, is that you would choose to not follow the rules. You would change the rules.
I live in the country, for sure. I know. I think a lot of people do. I would weigh the value of the regulatory path and consider it. And in the example that Dan listed, I would probably not do it. Yeah.
Well, and just for the record, working with the counties and cities that have landfills to be asking for that survey and a copy of that before they show up. And if they don't, to tell the people we're not taking that material, because if a person does that, say, oh, I think this was built 1980, there's no asbestos, and they haul it out there could be asbestos in it, and then they're contaminating the landfill and everybody else. So Thurston County does a really good job of saying, if they know it's construction debris, if you bag it up, they may not know. But we're pushing hard on the landfills to help us get that, because they're gonna contaminate their people. L&I is gonna be on their case, and they're gonna have to section off areas if they take stuff that is not been tested, that might be suspect material. So I understand what Greg is saying, and I understand the reasons, but it may come to where it's gonna get harder and harder to do that, as the landfills are trying to protect their employees. And, if you're taking a risk, if you get caught, you're gonna get a fine much bigger than the $100 you would have paid. Because again, a homeowner can sample themselves for renovation. They can't for demo, for renovation. So, for most renovations, I should say. So there is a risk, but there's also a risk of getting caught. And if you get caught, you're gonna pay more. And so we try to educate people up front, and yeah, they have to make that decision. But again, keep in mind the downstream people that might be affected if you're wrong.
So Mike, you're the reason we have these.
That's
Mike,
going
you're
to
the
come
reason we
back
have
on
these
myself. Myself and Mike of getting the word out. I mean, that's part of the communication is getting that out. I want to call out, and I can't think of the company's name, but there's a kitchen remodel company out of Yelm, actually, which surprised me, but they actually in their bid included that part of the permitting process was asbestos survey. And talking to them, they literally said, if you do your own demo, you can do that, but you still need to go through the ORCAA process, which I almost cried when I heard that.
Yeah. No, I think Mike said something I didn't catch when him and Dan.
I was gonna say, it sounds like you're the reason that we have these illegal dump sites in the woods. If you're going and telling the landfill they can't take it, I'm just.
Well, sometimes I think that's part of, that's a problem, yes.
And really, the only thing that I would raise in response to all that is very reasonable. I want people to do it the right way. When we have an increase in the cost, there is a risk that will push people to non-compliance.
Yeah.
I think we all get that. So I don't really have a lot of heartburn about this. I just wanted to talk about specifically, like, are we making it too hard to demolish? It sounds like probably not. And it sounds like, we have some examples of how we're actually, providing a pathway for individuals to do something cheaper than, or lower the cost of, some projects. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, we encourage some of them, if they're gonna do asbestos, flooring, just go over the top of it, save the money, or take it out yourself because it's an easy project. So we're gonna encourage people, if the situation's right, to, if they ask us about it, to say, yeah, you could probably do this type of job. you know, we're not gonna be out there trying to take money away from the contractors, but if they start asking about what to do, there are some jobs that are fairly easy that you can either avoid doing it or you can do it in a way that's simple. And we will help them with that.
And that's again, hence the time.
Time,
that-
yes,
that
yes.
we're spending,
Go ahead, Randy.
I'm gonna join Greg on this one and say something that may not be pertinent to it exactly, but it's still connected. I understand the reason for an increase, but the real issues we're facing and what also would increase the revenue is how we're doing it. As Michael was talking about, what we're doing, how we're doing, what opportunities we're giving them to get it done, or what impediment we're putting in front of them to get it done. Because the truth matter is we can get revenue by doing more things as well. In this situation, I think we're talking about all this, and it does suck to increase the rates. I'm almost usually always against that type of thing. I'm not in this circumstance, but we need to work more at finding better opportunities and options for them to do it. And it's always passed on to the customer. I don't care who you are, what they do, whether it's negotiation, whatever, they can negotiate it that much cheaper if it's not. So no matter what, everything we're doing here affects my neighbor. There's no way around that. The question that comes up is, what are we actually giving them for it? And should we be looking at other things in order to give them more benefit in the long haul for doing these things by themselves? So, like I said, I'm joining Greg. It's not that I actually have that much to say, just an opinion on the rest of it.
Thanks, Randy. I was waiting for your comments. I was wondering where you were at with it at this point. Go ahead, Mike.
So I guess my helpful addition to the conversation is I would encourage when we review this as a full board that staff gives that exact example that Dan gave of, you know, what the pathway means and how it can actually save someone money rather than just feel like more from a cost perspective.
Good point.
And in the future, other options for them to save the money, as this should be more than just this 2 minutes we're spending or the 10 minutes we're spending here. This is a longer game question.
Yeah. Well, it sounds, so I know we're looking for a decision on this item today. I appreciate staff bringing back the information so that we could kind of get all our questions answered, and I'm hoping, it sounds like we might be at a point where we can take action on this. Are there any final questions or comments or thoughts on this item before we make a motion?
I can just add that sort of the next steps on this would be if the finance committee decides to recommend this, to push it forward, then we could brief the full board on this in March. Because again, we'll be discussing it with the finance committee, the draft budget in March. We won't be discussing that with the full board until April. So my recommendation would be that we brief the full board on this, on asbestos demolition fees, and then also the registration fees, which we'll be talking about later this morning, at the March board meeting, so that there's time for the board to discuss these fee increases separate from then the budget discussion, which will happen at the April board meeting, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So, in the finance committee meetings, we can make motions to bring things to the full board, is that correct? Or, okay, so, then we're looking for a motion on this item. Is anyone comfortable making a motion?
I'll move to approve the proposed asbestos and demolition fee increase to be included in the draft fiscal year 2027 budget to be considered by the board this spring.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Reluctantly, of course. I'll join in with everybody else on it. It's clear I don't like it, but it is the way things are. I get it.
Thank you for your reluctant second, Randy. So motion by Mike and second by Randy. Any further discussion on this item? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, perfect. That goes forward unanimously. So we'll talk with the board about that. All right. So that takes us on to new business, and we have the fiscal year 2026 budget amendments. Is this you, Tyson?
It is me.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Dan, do you mind pulling up the amendment packet? Just in case we need to reference anything? And then scroll down to the income statement section. So past the narrative. Hopefully you guys, everyone has had a chance to kind of read through the narrative. So this proposed amendment will be shifting $22,000 between general fund line items. You can just keep it there, first page, Dan, thanks. Appropriating $111,400 from reserve funds into the general fund and increasing the wood smoke reduction budget by $46,200. The general fund is moving $22,000 from retirement and reallocating $12,000 into alarm monitoring and $10,000 into monitoring CPO. In addition, the general fund is also reallocating $7,000 from medical and moving into monitoring CPO. This allocation will help offset the fire and security panel replacement costs and the monitoring station move from Chica Peak. For the fund appropriations, the amendment moves $111,000 from the office building fund to cover the cost of replacing 2 heat pumps and a roof replacement. We've estimated a cost of replacing the heat pumps to be $35,000 and replacement of the roof to be $76,000. Thanks, Dan. We'll also be moving $400 from the security deposit fund into the general fund. This is for a security deposit refund for a tenant who occupied room 104. And then lastly, we'd like to increase the wood smoke reduction program budget by $46,200. You scroll down a little bit, Dan. Keep going. There, perfect. This increase brings us the budgeted expenditures to $157,200, which is half of the program award amount. So we are expecting to spend half of that award amount this fiscal year and the remainder next fiscal year. The only cost increase associated with this amendment will be the cost of replenishing the office building capital fund, which we plan to contribute to beginning in fiscal year 2027 and onward. That's all I have. Any questions about any of the amendments to the fiscal year 26 budget?
I have an easy question.
Sure.
Where does the wood smoke reduction program grant money come from?
That comes from the Department of Ecology.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, and the reason why we're making that change is just when we didn't have the grant agreements in place, we didn't yet know what the total was gonna be from ecology when we finalized our fiscal year 2026 budget. We actually got slightly more money than we included in the budget, so that's why we're making this.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's why we're making this budget amendment.
okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Tyson or staff? All right. Seeing none. So for this one, we would need a motion to bring this to the board as well. So is there a motion on this item?
I mean, it is already on the agenda in the regular meeting, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
But we won't-
yes, it is on the agenda, but having, yeah, but it might be helpful to hear that the finance committee is recommending moving it forward, but we did want to put it on the agenda, just because we would like to be able to move these, to make these adjustments, but if the committee decided, I mean, not to move it forward, we could have stricken it from the, board agenda too, so.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead, Randy.
Let's see. We're already on. Heath pumps. If you look at it, you've got $35,000 for Heath pumps.
Is there a type? Oh, yeah, yes, so there's a typo. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just I had to have something to say.
Yes, all right. A
Thanks.
lot of eyes on these things and obviously, we try to catch them, but,
Well, hey, we know you read the briefing memo, so that's good. Okay, so it sounds like we may not need a motion, but it would be helpful to have a motion to move this forward, even though it's on the agenda, so that the full board understands the position the finance committee is taking. So if, I'll give it a shot at calling for a motion, and if not, we can still move forward, but is there a motion on this item?
I'll
Madam
move
Chair,
that the Finance Committee recommends approval of the fiscal year 2026 budget amendments.
Perfect,
let
thank
Greg do
you.
it next. Greg, no, I'll second.
Thanks, Randy. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of moving this forward for recommendation to the full board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that goes forward unanimously. Thanks, everyone. So that brings us to our staff proposal regarding registration fees.
okay, so I can pick this, I can start this before kicking it over to Mike. So again, this is what we're doing with registration fees is similar to what we did with asbestos and demolition fees, and is consistent with Board Resolution 274, saying that the agency will increase fees annually based on the relevant consumer price index, but that periodically we do workload analysis to look at our fee programs to ensure that the fees are covering the costs of operating the programs. So essentially what the proposal here is to raise our registration fees by 5% as of July 1. So this is an additional 2.2% above the 2.8% CPI increase that will be included in our fiscal year 2027 budget. And then it also establishes a gasoline dispensing fee of $110, which will be assessed annually on most gasoline dispensing facilities to cover ORCAA's costs of effectively regulating these sources. Again, we've done the workload analysis and we do spend quite a bit of time with gasoline dispensing facilities. And so again, this new fee covers a little over an hour of our time, which and so that, again, this gets the program so that it covers the direct costs of operating the program. So high level overview with that, maybe hand it off to Mike and see, hopefully folks had a chance to look at the briefing memo and kind of understand what we're proposing here.
All right, so I try not to repeat too much what Jeff said, other than we're happy to say we're only asking for 2.2 above the 2.8. Basically we, as the memo says, 2-year average of $455,000. We need to get to about $470,000 roughly to cover the direct costs. So in looking at the fees, and we have over 600 sources. Of those, 251 are the smaller what we call the smaller gas stations. They're in an RC5 class. You know, we, just like I mentioned before, for the fees you're gonna get, we have to inspect. There's public education, there's complaint response, emission inventory that I talk about in the focus, county focus plan. There's enforcement, interagency assistance, where we help with other agencies, and we also industry assistance. We do a whole lot of help with the industries, and as Jeff mentioned, the gas stations, smaller ones, unfortunately take a lot more work. What happened was roughly several years ago, there was a federal rule that came out for gas stations, and that required them to do some testing. So we have to implement that. We haven't adjusted for that extra work. They basically have to do testing out there to make sure everything's tight. And they hire a contractor to come out and test, and then we have to review the results to make sure they are tight, and that they're not leaking. And so that added requirement came in 2019, and we've just been eating it. But as we do, we get further behind. And as I mentioned, about 200 and roughly 20 gas stations would fall into this category, and they take a lot more review time. They also have a lot of turnover, and or they don't have resources to put towards the gasoline monitoring like a Safeway would or whatever. So, you know, we spend a lot of time with them explaining similar to the asbestos stuff, explaining, why they have to do it, what it involves. And then we have to do our part based on the federal rules, and that is to review the testing, make sure it is, airtight, not leaking, and, that they're following the rules. So that is something that we have, come up with some ideas to reduce our cost in labor on that, where we're not entering it now, they can enter it and drop it right down into our system. There's some other things we're toying with to decrease the cost it takes to do that. A how-to video on what to monitor is another thing we're gonna do, because almost all these shops require us to kind of handhold them through with what they're supposed to be doing. And those fees, again, just like the other ones, it's internal office review and in the field review. So we're trying to capture with the gas station fee that extra work that the federal requires us to do. And also capture the time it takes to basically educate the smaller gas stations about what they need to be doing, what they should do, the importance of it. And so that's gonna address what we're doing with the gas stations, with that extra fee. And again, we cover more. On average, I was talking to some of the staff, and we're probably figuring we're spending, even though we're only asking for about an hour increase, we're spending on average a couple hours with these sources, to go over this stuff and look at the testing. A lot of times the testing isn't complete, and we have to go back to them and the vendor. We're trying to reach out to the vendors to tell them, please do all these steps so that the gas station owners get, a good, product.
By vendor, you mean service provider?
Service provider, sorry, yeah, and make sure they get a good product, because if they don't, then we have to spend more time with, education and occasionally on enforcement. So that's what you get for your $110 is a lot more education, a lot more review that we have to do. And we are continuing to work on ways to, reduce that. We also, for the other 2.2% on top of the 2.8%, is I feel good with this budget proposal, because we've had to absorb a lot of extra work with some of our other sources. With backup generators, they have some requirements that we are able to absorb. We're spending time with some of these unique sources. So we're kind of taking a registration program and saying, okay, you've got anything from a lumber mill to a nut and bolt galvanizing station to a crematory, and they all take different amount of times. How do we best get our bang for the buck so they don't have to go up very much to do it, but we got to see them all, and they're getting more and more variety as these new technology comes in. There's other stuff that takes new businesses that we regulate that we have to spend time in. So to capture that and to allow us to inspect and to review and to respond to complaints, for instance, every county has their share of complaints of business, generally a paint booth or a sawdust or something like that, sometimes a composter. So we gotta be able to cover those costs, and asking for the 2.2 on top of the 2.8, I think is, we're doing a pretty good job to do that and still inspect to preserve and make sure that, they're not out there polluting they're only putting the emissions out that they're allowed. And part of that cost is covering the emissions, and we do about 70 to 80 emission inventories points from these sources that we work with the engineers on, but it all gets charged to the registration program. So I'll end it at that and just ask for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike?
This one seems pretty reasonable to me.
Go ahead, Randy.
How much have we increased in this over the last 5 years?
Good question.
The last 5 years, it's just been the CPI.
Which is, how
Well,
much?
it's sorry.
Yeah, how much have we increased it over the last 5 years?
I'd have to go back and look at the CPI. Last year was 2.3, I believe.
2.3, and it's, so it's been, I think in 2022 or 2023, maybe, I think it was 4%. That was a big CPI, but so that's certainly something we could look at the, how much has it increased, but it has, it has been the consumer price index, over the past 5 years.
And one thing to note, to get to the gas station and all the RC5s, years ago, we had 15 classes. It was probably 15 years ago or so. And we narrowed that down. We made 5 classes, made it easier, but actually the RC5s, my understanding, they actually got, we put a lower price in there. So they actually went down several years ago, and we haven't caught back up to that. So again, if you've had a station for 5 years, I know that doesn't matter, but if you look at the long-term thing, we actually made a reduction years ago in that when we reduced them. And again, just trying to stay with it as new regulations come up that we have to take care of.
And Mike kind of hit on it, or mentioned it, but we do a lot of business assistance as part of this program. It's a lot of what the time pays for is informing, whether it's a gasoline dispensing facility operator or a paint shop operator, about the requirements and why these requirements are important. And again, so it's a lot of business assistance.
And we try to, I was just gonna say, if they're really low, we're trying not to hurt anybody. And the really low ones, if you remember, it was 2 years ago when Robert was here, we dropped some of the lower gas station requirements so they didn't have to register because they were low. So we continue to look at that too. So we're not impacting the small businesses, and the ones we can kind of shift off the radar, we'll do that to help them out.
So just so you know, the question was meant just to make us think for a second, because what I'm going to say next. I'm not, I understand what we're doing, but we're probably talking 20% or so over that period of time. And the only reason why I'm bringing that forward, not because I'm going to stand against this one. What I'm saying is, Jeff, we're at the point now when we're doing these increases, and they're not just a couple percent here and there. This is 5% all by itself.
Yeah.
Eventually, we're at the point where somebody has to start looking at what it takes to streamline and bring down the cost. We got to do it on both ends. We can't just keep expecting to pass it on. And I know I brought that up in the past, but I guess what I'm saying is to everybody in the room, we're about at the point to where that's all I'm going to be able to stomach without starting to push back hard. So I'm asking that, just saying a few things about, we're going to look at maybe reducing this part by 10% as we increase it by twice, doesn't quite cut it for me. And I'm sticking together as family on this to try and get through it. But it's time for our leadership that we're paying for to look at the streamlining and the cost cutting as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, Randy, and that's certainly. We're here, we're listening, Mike's listening, and when we do this conversation that we have with the inspectors, with the team here, is how can we streamline processes? And so those are all things that we're looking at as well. We're looking at, again, maybe some of these, especially the smaller facilities that we don't inspect, that we don't need to inspect every year. So going to a 2-year cycle on inspection, and other things like that, where the federal and state regulations allow us to do things like that.
And I think it's important to note that I totally agree with you, Randy. Believe it or not, I think that we should. It's our job to, be the best stewards we can of the environment, but with the money that we get from the public and the businesses to do that job. And to do so, we got to start somewhere. And I think what has happened over the past, and you've heard it repetitively with the asbestos and the registration, and you'll hear it with the NOCs, is we've kind of let that just sit low, and we've had to make that jump. But making that jump now, part of the big push that we're doing is finding out where we can make cost improvements, where we can do more with less, because some of this is driven by federal requirements that came in that we have to monitor. So we are looking at, okay, are we doing more with at least the same amount or less? And then we'll continue that process. And the best way to do that, I think, is to start from making sure you can meet your costs and then keep dropping it if you can. And we just weren't meeting those costs to begin with, so.
And as I said, I'm not going to fight this one. I'm just telling you, this is about where I start to draw the line in the sand for myself. What I am saying, and I want to remind everybody, is our organization, you're right, the public and the businesses, but our organization runs off the public, the business, the state, the federal, the county. All those are the same people, and it's all the same amount, and it's all expected to make this stuff work. So it's not just what you can get for them for this action. We're all here, you're all there because of other funds that come in as well to do the jobs. We have to find a way to streamline and cut those costs down eventually. And now it's time to start. Again, I'm going to support this, but I'm just saying I'm about at the end of what I can do without sitting in the room and saying I have to stand against it. And the sad part is when I get to that point, and I'm telling you that those of you who worked with me long enough, you know, I'm serious. I wouldn't be saying it. That might mean that I'm standing against something that I shouldn't be standing against because I'm at the top of my tolerance level of how much we're putting onto these people. That's all. That's what I'm just trying to give you notice of. So please look for ways to streamline, to cut it down. You know, we don't lay off people in this industry, but sometimes that is what happens. Every county right now is going through hell. Not us. I hate to say it, Mason County is not. We're doing incredible. We're not laying anybody off. We're not, but we're the rare dog, and one of the reasons is because of the stuff I'm saying right now.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for giving us advance notice that you're about to be at the end of your rope so that we don't, it's not sprung on us suddenly. But no, I hear you. Go ahead, Dan.
So I had a couple that thoughts came to mind just following up on what Randy said. I mean, we understand that I think I don't remember when you came on the board. I think it was after our last big registration fee revision, which was a pretty substantial revision. We actually implemented it over a 3-year period because there was a balancing of we hadn't done any revisions. That's when we implemented the CPI. And I think since about 2008, the average has been 2.5%. And I would have to check the numbers, but that sticks in my mind as kind of a annual average is in the 2% range. Totally get you on keeping things reasonable. And that's why, I mean, looking at gas station dispensing facility or gas dispensing facility fee, I mean, that's, $100 is a jump. It's a new fee, but it could have been much higher. But working with Mike, working with Jeff, we're looking at how we can mitigate that and doing things, as Mike mentioned, doing educational videos so that people can do self-inspection so that they're reducing the time that ORCAA needs to be out there. If they know what we're looking for, we can train them to look for that themselves, fix the problems before we get there. We can be down to an hour instead of 2 or 3 hours on site. So that's part of our process is education, try to work with businesses to make it easier for them to comply so we don't have to bring the hammer.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Randy.
Uh, one of my pet peeves is when government tells us, we could have done more, we could have took more, we could have done. That's like telling your wife that, hey, I only slapped you with an open hand, I didn't hit you with a fist. That's not the same. We still should always be realistic on what we take and look at it that way. There is no such thing as we didn't take all we could and all we should. That's just shouldn't even be part of our vocabulary. Every school that does it ends up losing their levy, I can tell you that. And you're right. I was actually sent on this board all those years ago to battle because of the increases. The interesting thing is I got here and just like now, it's justifiable. I don't like it, but at the same time, I can justify it. I can go back and I can fight for it in my community and my commission. That's why I do what I do.
Thank you. Okay, so good discussion. Is there anything further on this item that folks want to raise before we decide what to do next? All right, not hearing any. So do we want to move this forward to the full board for
I
for our
will, Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to move it forward to the full board.
Thanks, Randy.
Second.
All right, thanks, Mike. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'll just say I really appreciated Randy's position. It's a great thing to be reminded of. Like I said at the beginning, it seems reasonable. It really does. But I think, Randy's thoughts are going to be in the back of my mind from now on. So I appreciate him.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I agree, Randy, thanks for the thoughtful contributions to the discussion. I'm interested in, kind of knowing like a little bit more detail from staff when we do start when you do have streamlining improvements so that, we as a board aren't just hearing about fee increases, but we're also hearing more about what's being done on your end to kind of streamline those processes so that we can save money where it's possible. Cause I know that you're all doing that, but having specific examples of how you're doing that might help when we have these discussions to kind of bring some balance to the perspectives in the room. But otherwise, I have no further comments. Anything else before we call for the vote? All right, all in favor of moving this forward for recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that goes forward unanimously. Thanks, everyone. And so that brings us to the end of our agenda for good of the order. Do we have any items for good of the order?
Thanks for putting up with me today, guys.
Absolutely.
So what, I guess, as I mentioned, as we were closing out the asbestos discussion, what I would propose then to do is that we add board, a briefing on the fee proposal on asbestos and demolition fees and registration fees. Have that discussion with the full board in March as then a preview of then they would, again, they won't be taking action on it. But then that will then be part of our draft budget that the full board sees at the April meeting.
Okay.
But that way, we'll have more time for discussion about those fee items in March before, because there'll be a lot of other things related to the budget, I'm sure, in April.
Okay, perfect. So, oh, go ahead, Randy.
I still recommend that because we did this today and this is an increase. It'd be smart and wise if we went ahead and touched on it a little bit today with the meeting to get them warmed up for when the time does come. It's fresh in our minds. If a question comes up today, it can be defended even by me. But at the same time, it's better than laying it on them and getting the same reaction that I might feel. It's better to lay it out there, let them think about it and ask questions off the record later, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I agree with that, and I plan to kind of brief the board when we have our finance committee update, just to let them know what's coming. And that there will be a staff memo prepared for the full board for the March meeting. Any other items for good of the order? All right. So then we will go ahead. I see your hand, Randy. Is it still up from your comment you just made, or do you have more? Okay. All right. So then that brings us to the end of the meeting, and it's 9:33 and we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
See you soon.
See you back here.